Disney purchased the Star Wars franchise from George Lucas for billions of dollars with the expectation that a new film trilogy would basically print money. And honestly, on paper, that makes sense. Star Wars has always been a cultural juggernaut, and the opportunity to continue such an iconic story seemed like a surefire win. Fans were excited, of course, but always wary. There's a difference between excitement and blind trust, and by the time Disney announced its plans, many of us were hopeful but skeptical. Could this new trilogy live up to the legacy of the originals? Could Disney respect the story, the characters, and the heart of Star Wars, or would it falter? Looking back on The Force Awakens, I see so much potential in that film. I genuinely enjoyed it when it came out. It brought me back to the thrill of the Star Wars universe, introduced new characters who had real charisma, and felt like the beginning of something exciting. On the surface, it seemed like Disney might have gotten it right, but as someone who has followed the sequel trilogy knows, the real turning point didn't come until The Last Jedi. And in a trilogy, the second film is always the most crucial. The middle installment sets the tone, raises the stakes, and either strengthens the story or begins to unravel it. Look at the Dark Knight trilogy. The Dark Knight is widely hailed as one of the greatest superhero films of all time because it elevated the story and deepened the characters. The same goes for Empire Strikes Back in the original Star Wars trilogy. The middle film is pivotal. If it fails, the entire trilogy suffers. And that's exactly what happened with the Disney sequels. A change in the director for The Last Jedi, combined with a lack of clear overarching story or direction for the trilogy, meant that the middle film didn't just stumble, it faltered spectacularly. By the time the story reached the halfway point, nothing seemed to work. And if we consider the Disney Star Wars trilogy as a single story, The Force Awakens serves as Act 1, The Last Jedi as Act 2, and The Rise of Skywalker as the third act and climax. Storytelling is a careful art. If Act 2 falls apart, no matter how well Act 3 is executed, the overall story feels disjointed, unsatisfying, and unearned. And that's exactly what happened here. And that brings us to The Rise of Skywalker. By the time it arrived, the trilogy was already struggling under the weight of its middle installment. Fans hoped that the final film would patch the holes, but fundamentally the damage had been done. And when I say damage, I don't just mean to the films themselves, I mean to the entire franchise. Many assume that bad movies alone are what kill a franchise, but in this case, it was much more than that. The prequel trilogy was heavily criticized for years and often labeled as bad, yet even those films still felt like Star Wars. They had a coherent story, characters that fit into the universe, and a sense of purpose. The Disney sequels, particularly The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker, failed not only as films, but as Star Wars films. They lost the identity that made the franchise so special. One of the biggest issues was how The Last Jedi eliminated the fun and camaraderie that Star Wars had always celebrated. In the original and prequel trilogies, there's a sense of teamwork, adventure, and risk shared among the main characters. That energy is entirely absent in The Last Jedi. The heroes are immediately separated. Poe spends half the film arguing with a superior officer. Rey spends half the film trying to convince a disillusioned Luke Skywalker to return to the fight. Finn spends half the film with Rose, a character whose presence never really adds much to the story. And let's not forget the main villain of this trilogy, Snoke, or the supposed main villain of the trilogy, Snoke, is killed in the middle of the film, and then we get a shocking reveal that Kylo Ren becomes the main antagonist. It felt hollow. There was no real narrative, logic, no thematic purpose, just a twist meant to shock audiences. And then, of course, we have the return of Emperor Palpatine in The Rise of Skywalker. For decades, he had been definitively gone. Bringing him back not only undermined the story of the original trilogy, but also created narrative confusion. It didn't feel earned or meaningful. It simply served as a shocking plot device. It ignored the thematic and logical connections that made the prequel and original trilogies resonate. Star Wars has always been about storytelling, while fantastical has an internal logic and thematic resonance. By disregarding that, Disney broke something essential in the franchise. Fans saw this, and slowly many began to give up. It wasn't just disappointment in individual films, it was the frustration of watching a beloved story mismanaged, watching characters mishandled, and watching an entire narrative universe lose its direction. Disney Star Wars lost its identity. This isn't just my opinion, it's the sentiment echoed by countless fans online, in forums, and discussions everywhere. And Disney compounded the issue by expanding the Star Wars universe into television shows. On one hand, some of these series, like The Mandalorian, were incredibly well received. They explored new characters, added depth to the world, and offered fan stories that felt like Star Wars again. But here's the thing. What is the purpose of these shows if the main films, the backbone of the franchise, offer no clear direction? George Lucas himself said that the films were meant to tell Anakin Skywalker's story. When the films no longer have a clear narrative, why should fans care about ancillary stories? Right now, the Star Wars film franchise feels adrift. Is it about The Mandalorian and Grogu now? Some of these shows thrive because they occur before the Disney trilogy, which means they don't have to contend with the narrative mistakes of the films. But moving forward, what is the story? What connects the shows to the films? Fans are asking these questions, and the answers remain unclear. Disney had one shot to continue the saga with the original cast from the classic trilogy, and much of that opportunity was wasted. So what does this mean for the Star Wars universe and its fans? It means a sense of lost potential. It means frustration that iconic characters and storylines are mishandled, and it means awareness about the future. Fans deserve more than shock value and twists that undermine decades of storytelling. They deserve films that respect the narrative, honor the characters, and deliver stories that feel meaningful. Star Wars has always been about hope, heroism, and adventure. The Disney sequels often forgot those elements. Now I want to ask you, do you think Disney can course correct? Can the franchise recover from these missteps, or has the damage already been done? How would you tell the next chapter in Star Wars if you had complete creative control? Let me know in the comments. I genuinely hope that Disney reevaluates its approach. The franchise deserves films that serve as the backbone of the story. Spin-offs, TV series, and side stories are great, but they can't replace the central narrative. Star Wars is about the characters, the arcs, and the adventures that span generations. The films should drive the universe, not the other way around. If Disney can recapture that spirit, there's still hope. If they continue down a path of fragmented storytelling and shock value plot twists, the galaxy far, far away will continue to feel fractured and disjointed. The truth is, fans are still here, waiting, hoping for the next great Star Wars story, and I believe Disney can deliver, but it will require a clear plan, respect for the characters, and a dedication to the storytelling over spectacle. So what do you think? Were the Disney Star Wars films a betrayal of the franchise, or did they bring something new to the table? Which movie do you think had the most potential that was wasted, and why? Share your thoughts below. I'm excited to see the discussion. At the end of the day, Star Wars fans deserve more. They deserve films that feel like Star Wars films again. They deserve stories that inspire, entertain, and make sense within the galaxy we've loved for decades. And as much as I enjoyed the TV shows, the films must remain the foundation. The hope, the adventure, and the epic storytelling can return. It's up to Disney to decide whether they still honor that legacy and whether they want to give the Star Wars fans what we've been waiting for. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it.